If you were abducted as a child and then held in captivity for 8 entire years, during which you were subjected to horrendous things, and then you escaped, would you buy the house that you were held captive in as an adult? Well, she did, and this is one of the craziest survival stories I have ever heard. Not to mention, this case inspired a movie called 3096 Days, and it shows how this woman actually escaped her kidnapper. It is by far one of the most suspenseful movie scenes I have ever watched, and since this is based on a true story, let's talk about it. This is Natasha Kampusch. She was only 10 years old when she was kidnapped off the streets in broad daylight, a day that would forever change her life. Natasha was born and raised in Vienna, Austria by her mom and dad, and she had 2 older adult sisters. She also had a ton of nieces and nephews, and from the outside looking in, life was normal. Her mom and dad separated when she was really young, and behind closed doors, her parents would sometimes slap Natasha if she didn't listen. No one really knew this about her life though, but it deeply affected Natasha. So much so that on March 2nd, 1998, she was even contemplating ending her own life, but she never got the chance to. And instead, she was subjected to something straight out of a nightmare. That morning, 10-year-old Natasha left her mom's home in Vienna to start walking to school, but she never arrived. When she never came back home either, her mom knew something was horribly wrong and reported her missing to the police. Pretty much right away, a massive search was launched, and a 12-year-old witness actually came forward and said something alarming. This witness said that they saw Natasha while she was walking to school, and then they saw her being dragged into a white minibus by 2 men. This was a really solid first lead, so police tracked down every minibus in the area to interview the owner and examine the vehicles. And this took a long time because there were 776 minibuses. Who knew they were so popular? Eventually though, police interviewed Natasha's actual kidnapper, 36-year-old Wolfgang Priklopil. Wolfgang had a white minibus just like what the witness saw, and he lived about half an hour away from Vienna near Gensendorf in an old house that he inherited from his grandparents when they died in 1984. He was a communications technician, an only child, and was born and raised in Vienna. Those who knew him said he was a really weird and disturbed guy. Anyway, Wolfgang told police when they knocked on his door that he'd been home alone the morning of the kidnapping, and he had only used his minibus that day to transport rubble from the construction of his house to the dump. This was a flat-out lie, but the police believed him. Little did they know, though, that Wolfgang had actually kidnapped Natasha, and she was being held captive in a concrete bunker right below their feet. So going back to the morning of the abduction, Wolfgang saw Natasha walking down the street and decided to kidnap her. Natasha said that she tried to scream as he was forcing her into the car, but she froze. And as hard as she tried, nothing came out. Wolfgang then took her to his house, wrapped her in a blanket, and forced her into a 5x5 meter underground bunker in his home. He then took off her shoes and burned them, telling her, quote, "You won't be needing those again." End quote. For the next 8 years, Wolfgang held Natasha captive in this windowless, soundproof cellar beneath his garage. You could only access this bunker via a trapdoor in the garage, which then led to a narrow flight of stairs and eventually the bunker. The entrance to this room was a small steel hatch hidden behind a cupboard, so it was extremely well hidden and literally no one knew that it was there. And like I said, Wolfgang inherited this house from his grandpa, who built it after World War II. What would eventually become the room where Natasha was imprisoned was originally built as a bomb shelter, and by the time she was forced to live down there, it was damp and cold. No one could hear her scream. During the 8 years she was in captivity, Wolfgang brutally beat her up to 200 times a week and would occasionally SA her. And for the first 6 months of captivity, she wasn't allowed to leave this bunker for any reason. Wolfgang controlled all the lighting and electricity, so he would randomly turn the lights on and off. And since there were no windows, Natasha tried her best to count each second as they passed so she could try and remember when it was daytime and nighttime. But eventually it all blurred together and she could no longer tell. Wolfgang also installed a 2-way intercom so he could yell commands at her, and he did this so frequently that Natasha compared it to torture methods. During the first year, he would bring Natasha food, books, and a TV, and he would only allow her small periods of TV and radio time, usually only a couple of hours total, and he would only allow foreign broadcast so she could never see or hear updates on the search for her. Natasha found it strange though, because he would never come down to see her on the weekends, but she soon learned that it was because his mom would come and stay overnight with him every single weekend. So as much as she tried to yell to get her attention, his mom never knew because it was soundproof. She had no idea that a little girl was being held captive and was subjected to horrendous things right beneath her feet. In 2000, Natasha got her first period, and she said after this, everything changed. She said it was at this point that her childhood ended. At this point in time, Wolfgang would start bringing her up into the house, and over time, he would allow it more and more. But her time up there wasn't any better. He forced her to meticulously clean half naked. He also wanted to renovate his house, so he forced her to do all of the physical construction work. This work was way harder and more advanced than anything she knew how to do at 12 years old. But if she did even one thing wrong, he would beat her so badly that she could hear her bones crack. He was a clean freak too, so he made her wear a plastic bag over her hair so none of it would fall in his house. Eventually, he shaved her hair off altogether. If she cried, which was forbidden because he was worried that her tears would ruin his floor, he would choke her and drown her just enough to almost kill her. But as the years went on and she did more and more physical labor, she also got stronger. Strong enough that on one occasion, she attacked Wolfgang. But sadly, he was too strong and immediately overcame her. After this, he would restrict her food. And one of his favorite things to do was starve her as punishment so that she would be too weak to try and escape. After the first few years, like I said, Wolfgang would allow Natasha to come up into the house with him. But at night, and when he had to leave for work, he forced her back into the bunker. As time went on, he felt comfortable enough to let her outside to work in the garden alone, which she spent a lot of her time doing. She was still stuck there because he had a really big, heavy gate that was always locked. But now she was outside on her own. Because of this, so many people actually saw Natasha, like his neighbors and even one of his business partners. According to him, Natasha seemed happy and relaxed in the garden when he unexpectedly stopped by. Wolfgang always told them that she was a new housekeeper. Eventually, outside time turned into him letting her leave the house in his presence, but he threatened to kill her if she tried to escape or draw any sort of attention. Like one time, the two of them left to go to the store when they were pulled over by a police officer during a routine check. Natasha said that she tried making direct eye contact with the police officer to secretly tell him that she was in trouble and needed help, but the officer ignored her. At one point in time, Wolfgang even took her on a vacation near her old home in Vienna, but she never had a good chance to escape. Back in captivity, Natasha said that while the sexual abuse was minor, it did happen, but most of the time, he would chain her to his bed naked while he slept, or he would tie their hands together at night just so that they could cuddle. He was a creep. One of the main reasons that she didn't initially try to run away was because Wolfgang told her that all of the doors and windows on the house were booby-trapped with high explosives, and he also told her that he carried a gun 24/7. So if she even tried to escape, he would shoot her dead instantly. Natasha grew to deeply hate Wolfgang, and she admitted that she often fantasized about killing him and chopping his head off with an axe. She did everything she could to try and survive while in captivity, and one of the things that really kept her going was imagining her older self coming back to rescue her. And when I say Natasha was super smart, I mean it, because at such a young age, she started thinking of ways that she could survive. And she came up with this idea that if she acted younger than she was, then he wouldn't kill her. So she regressed to a toddler age. She would constantly ask Wolfgang to tuck her in at night and read her stories. I do think this worked. And she was so brave for trying new things in hopes of surviving just one day longer. So while this was all going on behind the scenes, everyone back home thought Natasha was dead. I mean, at first it seemed like she just vanished into thin air, and rumors about her disappearance really started to spread. Some people thought that she was sold into a sex trafficking ring, while others thought that she became a victim of organ theft. Regardless, no one knew that she was still alive that entire 8 years, just 30 minutes from her home where she was kidnapped. Right before Natasha disappeared, she had gone on vacation with her dad to Hungary. So when she went missing, she was still carrying her passport with her. Because of this, police thought that she may have been abducted and taken to a different country. So they heavily expanded their search abroad, but they found absolutely nothing. Fast forward 8 years later, and a disturbing and shocking discovery would be made. This brings us to August 23rd, 2006. That afternoon, Natasha was cleaning and vacuuming Wolfgang's minibus out in the garden. At some point, he got a phone call, but he couldn't hear her over the sound of the vacuum. So he went around the corner and out of sight to take the call. When Natasha looked up, she realized that the big, heavy gate that was always locked was now unlocked and ajar. So she made a split-second decision to take off running away from the house. house. She sprinted through neighboring gardens, down multiple streets, and jumped fences, all the while asking anyone she passed on the street to please call the police. But they all ignored her, so she continued to run. About 5 minutes later, she stopped at a 71-year-old's house and pounded on the window, saying, quote, "I am Natasha Kampusch." End quote. That homeowner was nice enough to call the police, who then rescued her. Right away, police knew that it was really Natasha just based on a scar that she had on her body, but DNA tests later confirmed it too. Natasha appeared to be in good health, but she was extremely pale and skinny, having only gained 7 pounds in the 8 years that she had been missing. She then told police all about Wolfgang, how he kidnapped her, and where he lived. So police went directly to his home, but he wasn't there. As they searched the home, they discovered the bunker where Natasha had been held captive, and in it was her passport from 8 years prior. Sadly, police were just too late. Knowing that he would be caught, Wolfgang drove himself to the nearby train station in Vienna and killed himself. He threw himself in front of an oncoming train just hours after Natasha escaped. That had been his plan all along. He told Natasha that if she ever escaped, police would never catch him alive. The timing of Natasha escaping was so critical because police found that literally right before she escaped, Wolfgang was trying to create fake papers as a Czech citizen so that he could live a new life there with Natasha. So finally, after 8 years, Natasha was finally free. It's just sad that Wolfgang got the easy way out and was never held criminally responsible for his actions. Although at the time this took place, the penalty for kidnappers who imprisoned their victims in Austria was not very harsh at all. If found alive, Wolfgang would have been facing just 10 years in prison, literally only 18 months longer than Natasha was held in captivity. So personally, I don't think that would have been justice either. After he was found, police ran his DNA through a nationwide criminal database to see if he could have been involved in other missing person cases, but there wasn't a match. Authorities also extensively searched his house up and down to see if there were any other hidden rooms or doors that could have been hiding more victims, but they never found anything. What's really sad though is that Natasha was finally reunited with her family after the fact, but they didn't really have a relationship after this, which is really heartbreaking. In 2010, a documentary called Natasha Kampusch, 3,096 Days in Captivity was released, and in it, Natasha sympathized with Wolfgang. She said she felt sorry for him and called him a poor soul. According to the police, Natasha sobbed when they told her that Wolfgang was found dead. Furthermore, Natasha talked about how she grew feelings for him and even lit a candle for him at the morgue. Despite this though, she knows that he is a criminal and what he did was horrible. Psychologists have gone on to suggest that she may have Stockholm Syndrome, but she is adamant that she does not. She also says that anyone who says this about her is super disrespectful, which I kind of get. I mean, the situation she was in is extremely unique, complex, and horrific. Like, imagine 8 years of your life being held hostage in these conditions. Natasha says she is allowed to navigate that and to process her own emotions against her kidnapper. She also went on to say that she didn't feel like she missed out on anything during her imprisonment. She said it saved her from drinking, smoking, and hanging out with bad people, which I guess is a good perspective to have. It's just sad because that's the life she was forced to live, and she definitely missed out on her childhood years. It just doesn't seem like she realizes it. Natasha went on to write a book called 3,096 Days, which was then adapted into this 2013 movie under the same name. Like I said, this is one of the craziest, most intense movies I've ever seen, strictly because of the escape scene. I think I watched this on Netflix a long time ago, and I just looked it up, but it doesn't look like it's available on there anymore. But I'm telling you guys, if you rent this movie, you will not be disappointed. In 2016, Natasha released a second book called 10 Years of Freedom, which I haven't read, but I definitely am now after researching this case. What's super crazy, at least to me, is that Natasha now owns the house where she was imprisoned. She claimed the house from Wolfgang's estate, and she said she did this to protect it from vandals and from being torn down. She said she kept it all these years later because it was a big part of her formative years, and she's been known to frequently go to the house to clean it. And part of the documentary was actually filmed in the bunker where she was held captive. It's kind of crazy. In 2011, she had the bunker filled in, but I can't imagine how unsettling and creepy it must feel to still go into that house. I don't know how she does it. Natasha went on to say, quote, "I have a stamp on my forehead that says victim of violence. I will be ostracized for the rest of my life." End quote. She also said that she bought the house to reclaim the interpretation of her own story. All I know is that Natasha is one of the strongest people I have ever read about. To survive 8 years in captivity like that, suffering horrendous abuse, only to bravely escape, have grace for her kidnapper, and to go on to conquer what would be most people's fear of returning to the scene of the crime. Because not only did she go back into that bunker willingly, she bought it. I'll leave you guys with one question.